Little Frosty, red leather, yellow leather, unique New York, unique New York.
Unique New York, a unicorn.
Welcome to the Find and Follow podcast, where we believe life is in the light, spiritual darkness is the enemy, and finding and following Jesus is the best way to live life. I'm Scott Langhand, your host, joined by the extraordinary co-host crew. As always, Craig and Kyle are here and present. Before we get too far into what we normally talk about, I was reminiscing a little bit because the old Gonzaga Bulldogs are number one in the nation.
Isn't that just cool?
The only undefeated team.
Yeah, because they're really good. They're
They are
way
really
better
good.
than the other teams. And they went number one in it's opinion poll. And I always give that a little bit of, it doesn't mean
An
anything.
opinion. You always have an opinion about the opinion poll?
Yeah, here's my opinion. The opinion poll, the rankings, it doesn't mean anything until about January, is what I always say. Like preseason number one, who knows really what the team's going to be in early
Too early,
December. Yeah, too early. But by January, I'm like, okay, we've got enough basketball. But the Zags were preseason number one.
Wire to wire.
Number one every single week, ended number one, undefeated. They got a legit shot at doing something awesome this year in basketball. So, Again, extending the invitation to everybody who is casual, sports fan, basketball fan. You're gonna want to jump on this year.
So I'm not as much of a basketball enthusiast as either one of you guys is, but I'm very impressed with the team this year and their record. I have a question for you. So there's no question they're a number one team. They're a really good team, probably the best in the nation. But their undefeated record, would that be different if they were up against different schools during the course of the regular season? Like if they played some schools outside of their...
Well, the first 7 games, they played 4 ranked teams and beat them all. And that's never been done before in the history of college basketball.
Okay.
So your question basically is, do they play legit people? Is there a chance for them to lose? Yeah, they played. They had a COVID break in December and were off for like 2 weeks. They came back, played the number 3 team at the time, Iowa, and just creamed them. Iowa has probably the player of the year in the nation in Garza, and so they came back and beat him.
Down.
They shut him down.
What's
This
the
is
other
the
team that
conversation
was undefeated until just this last week?
Baylor. So
Baylor.
we were supposed to play Baylor in our preseason. So again,
Have
and
they
that's-
played Baylor yet?
No, that was from COVID. They tried to reschedule it, never worked out.
Gotcha.
Although Few said like last week, he's like, "Hey, don't put it past me to try to schedule a few
What,
games
today, tomorrow?
Yeah, last week after they ended the season. He
I
was
know,
like,
but their game is next
I
Monday.
think he just said it kind of just to
stir the pot. Yeah.
But
No, but he would play.
Oh, yeah.
If someone's like, well, we're in North Carolina. We're in town today. You want to play, Mark? He's like, yeah, we're there.
Let's do it.
up
But that tends to be the knock, right? People say, "Oh, the WCC, it's a joke of a conference. They're playing."
And I'm not saying that that's true. I'm just asking the question because I don't know.
But again, they do one of the hardest non-conference schedules and again, that's another one of the knock that people say, well, it's they're playing them in January. You know, they didn't play Iowa in the middle of the year. But again, I have this conversation every Friday. My dad and I go skiing with my buddy Kenny, and my dad's a fan, but he's kind of a pessimist when it comes to sports. He's always naysaying on the Seahawks, and he's
cynical.
He's on the wagon, but he's always got something bad to say. So every Friday we have a debrief of the Thursday game. And Kenny is sitting in the back, who's not a basketball fan, and he's always like,
Kenny's just an arguer.
yes.
So he likes to jump in on anything.
But he thinks it's funny because he's like, did you guys watch the same game? Because I'll be like, man, they look so good. Man, it's like, oh, they look terrible. They're beatable. If they just figure, and like, we have these two perspectives. And so he's like, I get it. They're a good team. But, I mean, did you see Michigan last night? And I'm like, did you watch them shut down Garza? Everyone's all on Garza about, like, and he's a phenomenal player.
Yeah.
But we double teamed him and shut him down, and it wasn't an issue.
No.
And there's a lot of teams in the country who can't do that. And so, I think they got a great team. They did play a really, really good non-conference early schedule. And there are some teams in the WCC that are really good this year.
I mean, we can
Hey, if you're one of our listeners right now, just make a note to yourself. If you want to get Scott and Kyle going, just ask them about college basketball.
Pretty intense. I literally watch almost every single minute of the Zag season.
I don't think I have missed a minute this
Like,
year.
I watch Baylor games to see how they look, and I watch parts of Michigan and Illinois and see how I'm watching Texas Tech, and it's my jam. I'll watch college basketball, not football. I don't watch college football, but basketball, I'm in.
But here's the thing. I'm gonna just go a little further on your comment because I'm
and this is
defending.
not where I was going. By the way,
I know,
I
but
still have another spot I was trying to get to.
And
in
the
all of
longer you
this.
talk, the more you illustrate my point. But go ahead.
because
Kyle.
like Mondays they do basically a scrimmage against themselves, and when they're playing on Mondays against each other, they're playing the second best team in their conference.
or the nation.
Yeah,
I mean, it's close.
their second string is the second best team in their conference for sure, and
I've heard
probably
that.
within the top 25.
We have
I don't know if
we have starters from Florida that come to sit on the bench. Like
Yeah,
Nemhart, he
the bench-
transferred and he was a starter for 2 years at the University of Florida, which is a great basketball program, to come sit on the bench at Gonzaga.
Isn't that one of the
Like,
big reasons
that's-
that they're so good this year? Is the bench is so deep, with really
Their
really
bench is
first
always
string-
pretty deep. They're not that big on in the big guys. We don't have a lot of.
They're playing the best team basketball maybe in the history of Gonzaga basketball. I think Coach Few, he's talked about it. They, as a team, they play exceptionally well. Individually, there's no one that like ultra stands out. There's no one that's just super athletic or just the superstar. It's not the Adam
exceptional
Morrison.
teamwork.
The teamwork, plus they're all really high-level players, and then they're playing at a high level as team ball, which basketball's a team sport. Contrary to when you watch an NBA game and it's like 1-on-5 and it's isolation game with LeBron and anyways. People
I
jacking up
have this
half-court
conversation
shots.
with my dad. He's like, "Oh yeah, well guards, did you see like 30 points a game?" I'm like, "Yeah, but we got 3 guys who scored over 20 points that game,
Yeah.
right?" So it's like, if Kispert had to carry the whole team on his back, he might be scoring 30 points a game.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have to. And then there was a point early on in the year that we literally had 3 guys almost at 20 points per game, which is outrageous.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
And what does next year
And-
look like with
And-
guys that are
no,
likely
don't,
to
we
get?
can't, don't ask that question. We'll have to have let's start a new podcast.
Oh, yeah.
That just is commentary.
Welcome to the Zag Basketball Podcast.
Like last week, there was 4 Gonzaga Bulldogs that were starting in the NBA one night. Olenek, Clark, Hachimura, and Sabonis.
All-star, bro.
yeah, I know. No, I think the game there wasn't. Anyways, yeah.
What was your second question? Getting off.
No, so I was
okay.
Gonzaga. Maybe think end of the season, chance to win the whole. Like they're number 1. Everybody's picking them to win the national championship. If you're not, it's because you just want to be controversy, guy on the radio or
You
want
want to be Kyle's dad.
You just want to get clicks on your blog or something, like, you know what I mean? Or you're a homer and you're like, oh, my team's going to win. And then the other thing was like last year, ridiculous, the tournament got canceled. But
Yeah.
they had a legit shot to win last year. So I was thinking about it. Where were we when they were in the national championship game in 2017? When they were
Colombia.
playing and almost beat North Carolina.
Yes.
It came down to the
that's
last
right.
little
We
second.
were.
I remember watching it in a hotel room.
I remember that too.
We were on a flight from Houston to Bogota
for the Final Four.
for the Final Four. The flight was like running late, so they were super gracious. The airlines gave us like free TV.
Yep.
For and so until we got like out in the international waters, we watched
like through half.
through half or through into the third quarter for the Final Four game on flight. And then Monday, we were doing our ministry and seeing kids with compassion, and we're in a small town outside of, rural, basically, Colombia, and we're trying to tell our translators, we have to get back and watch this college basketball game, and they were like, huh? No, it's really, really big. It's for us, it's huge. And they're like, basketball? And so we were trying to connect it to soccer. I remember trying to tell the translators, it's like the World Cup. Okay, so if think about if Colombia was like going against Venezuela in the World Cup finals, like, would you want to watch? Like, okay, I get that. Like, that's us. We need to go.
I remember
go
just being
watch
like,
it.
"Can you figure out what channel it's on?" I remember asking him, "Hey, do you know ESPN or something? Can we get this?
we
Do we
get
have
it?"
to buy something? What do we need to do?"
Yes.
And he went, "Yeah, I think we got it. I think it's on this channel. We'll figure it out. I think the hotel has that.
Yeah.
I think you'll be fine, and you're good to go with this channel." And so we were like, and yeah, I still have pictures of it on my phone of all of us packed into your hotel room.
Yep.
Yeah.
Watching the Zags.
Oh,
And
And there was a
didn't
bunch
win.
of us on
I'd
the
forgotten
team.
about that.
We went to the store, bought special snacks and like
Yep.
candies
Oh, yeah.
and treats.
Oh, yeah.
And we made this party as we're ministering to churches and Colombians and meeting them and seeing our compassion kids that we're sponsoring and all that kind of. But right in the middle of that trip, we're like, but we got the Zags game, national champions.
That's right.
And it was the English broadcast, and you could hear it in the background, and then just Spanish translator commentators dubbed over the top. And so they'd interview Mark Few, and you'd hear Mark talking English, and then some guy in Spanish, and that was our national championship
I forgot
experience,
all about that.
crammed into a hotel room.
Yep.
Great experience.
Loving
Bummer that they
people,
lost,
helping people
but-
find and follow Jesus in Colombia.
Yeah.
Colombia.
Yeah, helping Compassion Project get off the ground.
Maybe we should go back this year.
helped
Maybe
the
we could
church get
recreate it.
planted. What's
we
that?
could go back this year while they in the national championship and watch it in Colombia again.
Yeah, I don't know who booked that trip, but he did not look at the basketball schedule.
It was you. I
He didn't
remember
believe-
figuring it out going, bro, we're leaving during the Final Four?
If they make it, like, what's that?
Yeah.
It just what worked out. It was a spring break,
Yep.
so it worked out for like some people schedule.
Yeah, it worked
work
out for my
schedule,
wife, students.
Yeah, your wife was.
I
able to
remember
come.
I remember landing in Colombia, and Ken Rablin had data through his work. He had paid for the international roaming.
I remember that.
And so we watched the first half, and they were doing really well. And I remember landing, he connected to international data and
Oh,
goes,
really?
guys, we won. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, super fun. Yeah, that trip was great. People like there was a couple people that had never been on an airplane or one time on an airplane in their life. Lots of people had never really even been out of the state or the region, let alone out of the country. Just seeing what God's up to around the world. I remember hearing some people's personal stories of like, whoa, blowing my mind here.
Yeah.
It was a fun trip. So anyways, yeah, that's why I was thinking about Zags and national championship, potential win it all, and we were in Colombia. And so that's kind of my segue to try to get us back to John and Jesus.
So are we going to finish out this podcast in Spanish? Is that where you're going with this?
Oh, man. Solamente en español.
Sí, vamos a hablar en
¿Hablamos?
español.
Kyle?
Come
No.
on, Kyle.
See?
Craig could carry it.
Juan, capítulo 19, versículo 17. John 19:17. That's kind of where we left off the last
Okay.
time we were in John.
And so if you're still listening through the Zags and the Spanish, welcome back. Here we are.
Exactly.
We lost half our viewership.
People are skipping forward. We did. We left off in talking about Jesus completing the mission of going to the cross, the crucifixion. And we talked 2 podcasts ago just about the intensity of this moment, the gravity of the moment, and how significant it is. And John is saying, hey, I'm an eyewitness to all of this going down. But it's hopefully you're ready for it. If you haven't been listening along, we're talking about the crucifixion, which we talked about before. It's kind of like you got to be a little bit more emotionally ready to. You just pop.
We started with the Zags, and now we're going to go in deep death of Jesus.
Yeah, I don't know how you get there, but
Yeah.
we tried. I tried.
Buckle up.
But yeah, so we're in John 19, and just again with the podcast, just this week hearing lots of good feedback from folks from all around the region, and it's way greater than Mission Church or what we're doing here, but just really helping people to connect with who Jesus is, who he really is in their life, and what he can do in their life. And for us locally, we're seeing a season of flourishing. I don't know if that's the right word, but flourishing, people reconnecting, re-engaging, people just going, I'm shaking off the 2020 funk and being more purposeful in my life and just kind of not riding the train of just whatever the society is doing, and kind of that funk that we all experience, and just the staleness that we all have experienced of like riding in neutral and just kind of waiting for whatever to happen or not happen. So we're in this season, I think, that's really encouraging to me, for people just re-engaging, reconnecting with who God is, and some of them are listening in on the podcast, and it's just fun to hear. So on that, I did throw out a couple weeks ago, if you got ideas of where we're going next, we've got a couple more weeks here in John 19, 20, and 21. And so heard some feedback, but if you got an idea of where we should go next, that would be helpful for you in knowing about who Christ is and what he can do in our lives, hit me up. Shoot me a text or shoot me an email, scott@mc.life. But anyways, back to John 19, crucifixion. And I love this way that it kind of goes down, where the truth of God comes from the mouth of Pilate, who is not a God-fearing person. And he just says in verse 14 to the Jews, he goes, here's your king, which is 100% true. but he doesn't believe it.
And they don't believe
And
it.
they don't believe it. They push back and they say, they're like, he's not our king. We're going to crucify him. Just take him away. And then they say, we have no king but Caesar. I'm sorry, what? The Jewish people have no king but Caesar? What is going on there, Craig? What do you think?
They're just saying the thing that they know that Pilate wants to hear in order to get what they want. And that they don't acknowledge Caesar at all. The Jewish people had no respect. They had contempt for Caesar because of the oppression they lived under. They're just saying this because it's expedient in the moment to get where they want to go with what's playing out.
Yeah. But this is like the whole crux of the whole thing is Jesus your king? And here's Pilate's declaration. Here's the Jews' declaration. And then there's a bunch of people witnessing this, that Jesus is their king, and they're silent in the midst of all this.
And just to fast forward a little bit, we'll come back to the actual crucifixion. But then it says in verse 19, Pilate writes an inscription and put it on the cross. And it was Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. Well, the Jews were furious over that. It's like, no, wrong thing to put up there, Pilate.
Right.
And they appealed to him and said, hey, we want you to put, he said that he was King of the Jews. And Pilate said, hey, what I wrote, deal with it. And he left it.
Yeah.
And
he
again,
wrote
it's poignant.
Yeah, and he wrote it in 3 languages, all of the common languages of the area, Aramaic, Latin, and Greek, so that anybody walking by could read it and could read, here's the king, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the power of God at work through everybody, you know? Like, God uses so many people and so many different things more than we realize, and he's using a Roman official here to declare the king is here, and this is what Jesus is doing, is he's going to the cross for everybody because he loves them so much.
Yeah.
But there's so much going on here that's, and I think even these nuances that we're seeing with the language and there's political issues, there's religious issues, and there's a really depth of all these things going on with, the Jews having this perception of what's going on with what Jesus is claiming, what Pilate's doing as he's leading these people, politically, and this tension and this dichotomy of all of this stuff coming together. And it's confusing, right, for a lot of us to go like, wait, what is happening, and what is the significance of Pilate saying this or releasing this or the Jews claiming this? But the depth of what Jesus is doing holistically, I think, is the beautiful picture of it, is that his life, death, and resurrection is so much bigger than this political system, than this religious system, than life itself. It's just, I mean, the deeper you dive into this, you just see how Jesus is rising above some of those things, the political system, the religious system.
To your point, Kyle, there are all those layers going on as this is playing out, the religious dynamics and the political dynamics, and then there are a lot of egos involved, personal agendas, people wanting what they want in the moment, and insecurities. But then the most important layer is what's going on spiritually. It's God doing what had to be done for the redemption of the human race. And sometimes, the disciples didn't realize that. They couldn't possibly have understood that at this point in their journey, and they're disillusioned by it. And I think that helps us just think through some of the stuff we go through. We're having an emotional response. There's an economic dynamic going on. Like in this pandemic, there's a political dynamic going on. There's a religious dynamic going on. And all those things are real and they're in play, but underlying all of that is the most important layer, the most important dynamic, and that's spiritually. What's God doing? And that's one of the things I love about 2020 is that the pandemic slowed down our schools and our economy and affected politics, but it didn't slow the kingdom down, not one bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It didn't catch God off guard. And neither did this moment. The moment of the crucifixion and the resurrection was God's plan from the beginning.
From the beginning.
Before
the beginning.
Before the creation of the world, his plan was to send Christ because he knew, us creating the image of God, but then we're going to try to choose our own way and try to be God ourselves and determine what is good and evil and have our own sense of justice. And we're not qualified to choose what is good and evil. And then I love even in here, and John captures a few of them, where there's dozens of prophecies and predictions that were hundreds and if not thousands of years earlier that come true in this moment. And so like one of them was, where am I at here? Verse 36. verse 36. So after they'd hung on the cross, the Jews didn't want the criminals, and Jesus, again, falsely accused, being sentenced as a criminal, even though he wasn't, hanging with two other criminals. So they wanted to break their bones so that they would die quicker, because crucifixion, you basically die from asphyxiation.
It's a slow and agonizing, horrible form of capital punishment.
You're just hanging there and you just run out of air. You just run out of lungs. And so if you break their legs, then they're not able to push themselves up and catch breath.
Yeah, more specifically, they had to actually push on the nails that were through their feet to push up, take pressure off the lungs to get a breath, and then collapse back down in pain, then push up. And after a while, they just couldn't do that anymore.
They just run out. And so they go to the first guy, break his legs so that he dies because he's not able to breathe. They go to the second guy, break his legs, and then they come to Christ, and he's already given up his spirit and has finished his work because he's in charge, regardless of what anybody else thinks who's in charge. But he's in charge, so he gave up his spirit to accomplish the mission, and so they found him to already be dead and did not break his bone, which in verse 36 says, these things happen so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken.
And then again, the next verse.
Yeah. But that they pierced his side. There's like, I don't know, a dozen or more that are just even right here between all the Gospels of predictions of just the death and how that's going to go down, and that they cast lots for his clothes, all that kind of stuff. But the broken bones one is a reference back to the Passover, is which they're at. The Jews are having the bodies taken down because they don't want dead people hanging during the Passover, which is this most sacred of Sabbaths in the entire year, to celebrate the deliverance of the Israelites out of Egypt and the angel of death that passed over all of Egypt. But the people were spared by having blood put on wood cross posts, the door frame. But there was some shed blood of a lamb that was put on some wood, some door frames, right? And that you couldn't break the bone of the lamb, and you had this whole thing. Well, why is that? Did the lamb save them? No, I mean, God's
all foreshadowing.
Grace and mercy, but it's all foreshadowing to point to this moment, that whatever that was, 15 or 1,700 years before.
Yeah,
I'm not really always
the
great
Exodus
at
is about 1,500.
Yeah, 1,500 years before. Why was that done? And every Passover that came around every single year, that they would have this as perfect as it could be lamb with unbroken bones. It's because it foreshadowed Christ. And for the Jewish people, and Jesus just had the meal in preparation for the Sabbath with them, and instituted this new thing called the Lord's Supper, and it replaced the symbols of the wine cups at Passover, and now Jesus' blood is for the forgiveness of all sin. And so there's just this, even in this one verse in John, and saying, hey, they went to Jesus, and these Romans were fulfilling God's plan. Even though they probably weren't God-fearing people or believers in Christ, they could have just easily chosen to break his leg, right? But they didn't. Because why? Because God's in control.
Because the sovereign God is in control.
Because God's got a plan. Yep. Regardless of what humans think they're doing, God's in charge. And he's unfolding something that's happening. And so I love how John captures numbers of those. And it just is there's evidence. That's stuff that's been written down, passed along for hundreds and thousands of years. Again, I'm not the best at the apologetics on this, but Christ fulfilled
the historicity.
Yeah, the 400 prophecies, or 350 to 400 prophecies that were for hundreds of years and recorded. He came and fulfilled them. How he was born, that he came out of Egypt because they escaped, and all the symbolism and everything God's doing. The whole Bible is one story that leads to Jesus.
Yep.
And I love even verse 35, just John's little add-on there. Hey, trust me.
What's it say?
Is what I read. This report is from an eyewitness giving an accurate account. He speaks the truth so that you also can believe. I'm assuming John's talking about himself there.
I think so.
Because John does that a lot. Where he's like, this dude is awesome.
Yeah.
And Jesus really likes him. Oh, yeah, it's me.
Check me out.
Yeah.
But
he talks about himself in third person.
Right? I was there. This isn't just... This is an eyewitness account. These are things that you can take to the bank. And Scott, you just referenced it. This idea that this isn't just something I heard or hearsay, or we played the telephone game for a while and then this is what came out, right? And I think this is some people's maybe a hurdle for them in coming to faith in Christ is like, yeah, this sounds really out there, and all this stuff happens, and we read these Gospels, and they all have the exact same account, but historically accurate accounts that are also recorded other places in history, not just the Gospels. But John's going, hey, I was there. I'm not just making this up to sound cool. I'm not writing another Star Wars story, right? Like, I was there. This is how it happened. And like, you would think I wrote this based off, I almost think, to your point, Scott, he's like, yeah, I read Isaiah, and I read some of these Old Testament prophecies, and I just put together, this is what happened with Jesus. No, this is what I saw. Oh, and by the way, it's exactly what God foretold thousands of years ago.
Yeah. Go ahead. Did
Well,
you have something?
I just want us to rewind a little bit here. We've moved on in the chapter a bit, but, just verse 18, it just, for me, it's just a moment to pause and just let it sink in. There they crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Jesus in between. And the 2 men were criminals, thieves, the Gospels tell us. And here the creator of the universe is hanging on a cross in between 2 criminals. I mean, what a scene, what a moment in human history. And who would do that? Well, the answer is the one who loves us the most, who created us and is wanting to be our Redeemer. It's the ultimate demonstration of love. No greater love. Jesus himself said that. No greater love has anyone for anybody else than to lay down your life for your friends. And that's what's happening right there. Mm-hmm. It's powerful.
Super powerful. And what is recorded for us that happens in those couple hours as they're hanging there, one of them is that one of the criminals gets to be in paradise with Jesus.
Yeah, he's redeeming people right up to the last.
Yeah, and Jesus is there unjust and falsely accused, but the guy next to him is 100% guilty, as far as we know, right?
Well, they said that about themselves, both thieves. Like, yeah, we're guilty.
Yeah, we're guilty. Like, there's no need to cover it up now. Like,
we're
it's
getting
going
what we
down.
deserve.
Yeah, and in that moment, Christ's compassion and concern for others, and the whole point, like Craig, you're saying, is he's doing this for us, for redemption for the entire world, and for all of the image bearers of God to have restoration. And he goes, hey, this guy has this revelation moment, like, no, wait, I think you really are the Christ, and you have something to offer that nobody else. And Jesus says, right on, buddy. Today you're going to be with me in paradise.
Our good friend Bob wrote a book called Love Does. Bob Goff. And
I like how you went good friend.
Yeah, our good friend.
Oh, I just go friend usually. You're pretty tight.
I have some
Good
other
friend.
friends. He's a good friend.
He's a good friend.
I have some bad friends.
I do have
My
some
bad friend, Scott.
Bad
But
friends.
and it's such a powerful reminder and such a biblical truth that love is not just in word only. It is in word, but it's not in word only. It is in action, and so that's his point. Love does, and as I think about this moment, I realize it's also true to say, or accurate to say, love did.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate expression of love in action, as he is there on the cross.
Yeah, and I love how the guy gets to jump in on that at the last minute. I mean, it just really emphasizes the point of God's grace and mercy to each one of us, and there's nothing I can do to work myself into right standing with God. Because what did this guy do in his life? He's dying next to Jesus, and he gets to be in paradise.
Yep.
And he didn't do anything to, quote-unquote, deserve it. It's all about the forgiveness of sin through Christ and God's grace and mercy. And it just, for me, like, how does the crucifixion hit me every day? This is part of it. It's the compassion of Christ, and it's because of his work, and it has nothing to do with my work and my, lineage or religious history or family history or what I've done in good works. It's like, oh, no, it's the work of the perfect sacrifice that foreshadowed, right, the lamb, of Passover. I keep trying to say Pentecost. I keep getting hung up my own brain.
That's coming after this.
That's coming up next.
Give him a sec.
But of Passover and the need for forgiveness of sin and how people were just waiting for this moment, waiting. And
So-
I was going to point out the other thing of how, like, in the middle of the crucifixion is happening, how loving Christ is, where he has this interaction with his mom.
I was going to go there next. So
Okay.
go ahead. You got
No,
it.
I was going to actually say that.
I was going to go
Actually, I think my mom was going to go there last week on
She
the
was.
podcast, and we just ran out of time.
there. Yeah. Well, go ahead. It's a great moment.
But it's just this point of Jesus is fully human, fully God, and in this moment of suffering and agony and taking on the sin of the world, beyond like the physical pain and suffering, the weight of the sin of the world, he's taking care of his mom. Presumably Joseph had passed already and wasn't around to care for Mary. And so Jesus saw his mother, the verse 26, when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved, again, John's term for himself.
That awesome dude that was hanging out, really handsome guy.
That good-looking, tall, broad-shouldered, like pretty well-to-do.
Gifted individual.
Gifted guy. Oh, there's something awesome in chapter 20 I can't wait to get to, too, on that note. But anyways, so he saw his mom, and he saw John standing nearby, and he said to his mom, Dear woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, the disciple took her into his home. And so it's this moment of like, I'm caring for my mom through the rest of this. Like, okay, John, you have the responsibility. It's over to you to really care for her, provide for her needs, make sure she's taken care of. That you guys, not only family like we would say in Jesus, we're brothers and sisters, but even more than that, like real practically, that you're going to take care of her needs, and you are literally like mother and son now.
So one of the things I like to point out when I consider that, and I'm talking with people about that moment that he has with his mother and with John, is just the presence of mind that he has and the focus on others, like you pointed out with the thief on the cross next to him. In both these instances, I mean, Jesus is experiencing unimaginable, unthinkable, incomprehensible suffering, not only physically, but spiritually.
Yeah.
The sin of the world is on him. And yet, despite all that he's going through, he has a presence of mind to care about the thief on the cross, to care about John, to care about his mother. And that's just, to me, an amazing demonstration of who Jesus is and his commitment to other people. He's doing all of what he's doing on the cross already for everyone else, for the entire human race, and then has the presence of mind to make it personal for the thief, for his mom, for John. And I just think that's an amazing thing about Jesus. And it also leads me to this. So these are 2 of 7 statements that he makes while he's hanging on the cross. If you're listening and want to do a fun little study, get the different Gospels out and read through and make a list of the 7 things that he says while he's on the cross. And one of them is, today you'll be with me in paradise, the thief. This instance here with John and his mother. And then one of the things he says is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And that's his agony spiritually at being separated from the Father for the one and only time ever in eternity. And it's during that few hours that he's hanging on the cross, and he's become sin so that we might become the righteousness of God in Christ. And that separation he's experiencing caused physical darkness for about 3 hours, it tells us. And Jesus is just like, what's going on? Never been separated from the Father. Father and I are one, he says in another place in John. And now he's feeling anything but oneness. And why? Well, we're the reason why. Mm-hmm. And he's willing to endure that. And then he says several other things, I thirst. And then finally, the last thing is, it is finished. So there's a couple others there. You can search those out.
I was saying, you almost just gave him the list. People that wanted to get the paper.
I was going to say, I thought you were going all 7. Yeah. I was just going to speak to that because I think it's interesting to me the things that, and we've talked a little bit about this, the things that John points out in his gospel, because this crucifixion part here is a little more slim than the other synoptic gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke talk a little bit more about some of those experiences, some of what's happening around, the things that he's communicating to people around, the way that they're talking. But this interaction, again, I think goes to the depth of John's relationship with Jesus and the things that are important. He still gets the whole story. He's not missing pieces, but the things that he's pointing out that were important to him in his eyewitness account.
Correct.
And
are specific to this relational dynamic that he had with Jesus, this loving, again, relational thing. He's not penning and then this happened, and then, the second later this happened, which some of the gospel writers, Luke specifically, is a lot more, he's a writer, right? So it's a lot more like dictated exactly what happened,
right,
when it happened, how it happened.
Luke's a doctor, so he's going to be more detailed. To try to really gross generalize it. Like, John's more of a feeler, probably, and he's more of just like, let's just be creative writing on this. And Luke's a detailed doctor. And John doesn't record, like, How did Jesus get abused and beaten and persecuted before he went to the cross?
Yep.
John doesn't record that.
And
for
John
us.
writes quite a bit after the other three Gospels are written, and he's writing for a specific purpose. Well, lots of reasons, of course, but one of his main reasons for writing what he does is to counteract a doctrinal problem that was, by that time, very prevalent, and that's Gnosticism. The whole idea that he's not fully God, fully man, that he wasn't God in human flesh, it was being undermined, that truth that he is fully God and fully man, being undermined by the Gnostic teachers. And John's like, no, you guys got it all wrong. Let me tell you, I was there, I witnessed it, here's what actually happened. And so he picks and chooses the things he does, in part because he wants them to realize, no, this is really a human being. Back to my list of 4 or 7 things, 4 of them are right here in this chapter.
Yeah, like on verse 34 where John says there was a sudden flow of blood and water after they pierced his side. He was real flesh and blood.
Correct. That's one of the
He
reasons.
wasn't just a ghost.
Yep.
He wasn't just a spiritual being.
Right. That's
there
why.
was there was bodily fluids coming out. It was
Yep.
a real crucifixion that happened.
Correct.
So one of the things too that is here that I find interesting and maybe helpful, I think, for us is verse 38, after the crucifixion and everybody's dead, they gotta clean up. And so later Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jews, and he was like
he
in
hadn't
the
come
Jewish.
out of the closet.
He was
as
a Jewish
believer.
leader,
Yeah.
so it wasn't just a regular Joe. He was.
Regular Joe. I see what
See what you did there, yeah.
Oh, that was unintentional, to be honest. It totally was. Anyways.
Joe
so,
of Arimathea.
yeah, but with Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, who we.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. Did you point this out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Long
I was like,
time ago.
Refer back to episodes.
Episode 20 episodes ago.
The-
Whenever we're in chapter
Yep.
3.
Yep.
Because Nick at night is how I remember that.
Yep. Nick at Night
Nick at
and
Night
Regular Joe.
And regular Joe. Chapter 3, where Nicodemus is real curious about Jesus. And then in chapter 7, we see Nicodemus kind of coming to faith in Christ, right? Being reborn. They have that conversation in 3. In 7, where Jesus is getting some pressure and he's sticking up for Jesus, saying, hey, wait a minute, time out here, what's going on? And we talked about that when we were there. And then here he's like, I'm jumping in. So we see him kind of his spiritual journey just in 3 quick snapshots.
Yep.
Belief and born again, begin to follow and grow faith, and now he's all in where he's showing up. My question that maybe is helpful for us, where's Peter, James, and John? Where are the rest of the disciples? Why aren't they the ones asking for the body to bury him and take care of him?
Because they're having a crisis of faith, literally, and they've been scattered. They went home. Peter denied him 3 times, felt horrible about that, was ashamed. They're all disillusioned by this. You notice, now John's there at the cross, but no mention of the other disciples. But there's quite a few women, Mary's sister, Mary Magdalene, and apparently some others as well. But only John is mentioned as one of the 12, well, the 11 at that point.
Yeah.
Where are the others? They've been scattered.
That's the other part that, like, John doesn't record Judas's experience like the other Gospels do. But, yeah, like the questioning in the faith and the doubt and when real life hits is maybe with the helpful part, where sometimes I feel guilty or bad when I'm like, my faith's kind of weak today or in this moment. And yet here are this group of guys and lots of others. We tend to focus on a couple.
Yeah, that was kind of
Lots
my
of
point
others.
that I think that we tend to think about. I mean, we said a lot, like, hey, the followers of Jesus or the disciples of Jesus, and most of the time in our mind or a hearer's mind, they go, oh, there's these 12 dudes.
The apostles.
Yep, right, these 12 apostles of Jesus. We know all their names. They were called. They were fishermen. They were doctors. They were, right, and we go there. And this points out to me, and I think we made this point when we talked about Nicodemus, we read these stories of interactions with people with Jesus, and we think they're one-off. And, oh, that's cool. And then Nicodemus went back to his life, right? And some people did that. And we know that. Like, this guy had this conversation with Jesus, left, and we never hear about him again. But there's so many people where Jesus had these interactions with them, and then they gave up their life to follow him. And he had this huge mass of followers that were men and women and children that were, like, hanging on every word he said. And some of these things, and that's why I like that you pointed that back out again. Nicodemus is one of those that we were like, no, he followed Jesus. And there's these people
secretly,
that did this.
He and Joseph are are secret.
Yeah.
Because they're religious leaders.
Yeah.
And they're afraid of the Jews and the pressure and the persecution, at that point at least.
Yeah.
Probably not secret anymore.
Probably not. Nicodemus
If
is
you're the
coming-
guy paying for someone else's burial and you're, coming and
Yeah.
saying, hey, I'm going to take care of this, maybe because the Jews wanted the bodies down for the Passover, and he's like, all right, hey, I'll do the good deed for us, like us Jews, like wink, wink, nod, nod. But he'd been a follower. Mm-hmm. He'd heard enough about Jesus to believe, and he's doing the proper things to bury him, got a tomb that was brand new, and, just followed God's plan. Whether he was conscious of it or not, he was being directed by the Spirit of God. But it just was, again, like, where did the disciples go? And we'll get to it later, but the empty tomb, like, why aren't they all standing there waiting for Jesus to come out? Because their faith is so amazing, right?
Yeah.
And Peter, and we just kind of put
It's
them
just-
on too much of a pedestal.
Right. It's just
and I'm not trying to bring them down to elevate myself. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to humanize them and go, hey,
They are human.
we all
That's the point.
struggle.
Yep.
And Thomas, later we'll get into it more, but he's like, I need to see in person. And Jesus is like, cool, but wow, how great for those that are listening to this podcast that will have belief. 'Cause
Without
good,
seeing.
Without seeing. Good on them, because there's
Yep.
so much more faith in things unseen. And so, if you're listening and you have moments of doubt and faith, don't let it sidetrack you from following Jesus. Like his closest followers had doubt and
even
struggled
John the
with their
Baptist.
faith.
I mean, if anybody was praised by Jesus, it was John the Baptist. And late in his life, when he was in prison, not long before he was beheaded, he sent some of his disciples to Jesus, like, now I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
So go ask Jesus, are you actually the one that I thought you were, or should we look for somebody else?
Right? So
And
I'm questioning.
Yeah, and that's not to rag on John. That's just John being human. We're all human, and the good news is, not only do we have a lot of company, and we can not feel embarrassed or ashamed of the fact that we have the same struggles as everybody else, but the good news is God gets it. God understands that and makes allowance for our humanity, our imperfection. He knows we're on a journey. He knows we're not there yet, and he's lovingly committed to help us take the next step, little by little, to get where he wants us to go. Back to your earlier point about the crowd that was surrounding Jesus, it was very real. The reason that he fed 5,000 and 4,000 is because there was a crowd, right? Those people were following him, sometimes out into remote places. But also in Luke chapter, I think it's Luke 10, there's 72 that are sent out, right? Mm-hmm. So how did he get 72 people that he would actually put in charge of public ministry, going from city to city? Well, he picked 72 out of probably hundreds of options.
And then later, more than that. Right?
Well, it was 10 in Luke 9 and 72 in Luke 10, I think is. But then also we have in 1 Corinthians 15, after the resurrection, he appears to 500 people that are gathered together. So that's a group. And then in the upper room, there was 120.
Yeah, it's not just 3 dudes or 1 dude.
Yeah, and that was back to my point that, I even read, and we'll read in verse 20, the disciples. And I think when we read that, we think of the disciples, we think of 12 dudes. And my point is, it's much bigger than that. And I think we need to get that out of our head. There's times when Jesus is walking around with 12 guys, his inner circle, and then 3 even at different times, and that's specific. But there was disciples of Jesus. Jesus was making disciples and preaching and talking and teaching to thousands of people, hundreds of people that were choosing to be his disciples. Some of them had to do it a little secretly or go around and do this kind of stuff. But there was a lot of people who were following him, or he would come to a city and they would, they knew that he would be there, and they came to see him or hear him or touch him. And I think the depth and the width of that, I think, is something we need to be aware of as we read those things, because it's really easy just to go, oh, they're just talking about the 12 guys.
No, far greater.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's how you end up with saints and idolize people and try to turn them into gods, and they're not.
Yep.
That's how that happens. But back to, the comforting thing for me, I think, is Jesus knows we're on a journey, Craig, like you said, and the longer we follow, and I'm kind of speaking for myself, but I know people, the longer we follow Jesus and we don't feel like we're quote unquote doing the right things, and we should have by now, and you kind of feel that guilt of like, oh, my faith should be stronger, or I should be deeper in this area, or I should know things about the scriptures more than I should. It's been long enough. And we begin to beat ourselves up. Like, God's okay with us in the direction we're heading and how we're growing more than the destination. and we get hung up.
Correct.
And again, the guy on the cross, if Jesus looked at like, well, what have you done? Let's weigh it out, and like, what have you done for the kingdom of God? It just really highlights the crucifixion, just highlights God's forgiveness, his love, his grace, his mercy. And even these guys, I mean, how rough, we'll get into it more, but how rough for Peter, who denied him, maybe walked away when the Romans were taking the body down. Maybe he was there. How did he sleep that night?
Not well,
You know
if
what
at
I mean?
all.
Because we're snapshot right in the middle. Now, we know the end. All of them come back around. They do amazing things for God. Their courage goes up. The Spirit is in them. And they are like bold, and they're preaching around the world, and they die for him. So, Peter, is it Peter, right, that says, I don't want to, he gets crucified? Am I correct on this?
Tradition tells us that.
Tradition says, like, as best as we can, like, don't crucify me like my Savior upside down, because I'm not even worthy to be like he was in the death. And so they come around, and they're strong, and they're bold, and they're courageous, and they're preaching the good news. They go to jail, and they sing songs about it because it's awesome. So that's the end. But like today, these next 2 nights, like, I bet they don't sleep well at all.
No.
And there's a loss, and there is agony, and their king and their savior and their friend, and their hope and restoration for their world is just like turned upside down, and it's dark. But as the old saying goes, it's Friday,
But Sundays
are coming.
Hey, so
But they didn't know Sunday was coming. They just thought it was.
they should have known.
They should
but
have known.
I
They did
know.
know. They just didn't believe,
but
or they.
didn't connect the
their
dots or
feelings
something.
weren't there.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to say that to encourage all of us. Like, if we have those times where you're doubting, like, but where else are you going to go to find life?
Exactly.
Where else you
I know
gonna
we're running out of time here,
Yeah, we gotta
but you
wrap it
said
up.
something I want to lean into, Scott. You said something about being on the right road and headed the right direction.
Yeah.
And I just think that bears repeating. So often we do that. Well, I don't pray enough, or I haven't witnessed enough, or I haven't done this enough or that enough, and I'm not good enough, and I should be further along, and all that stuff that you talked about. We get stuck in that stuff, and we lose sight of the fact that the 2 most important things with respect to our journey are we on the right road, going in the right direction? It's not as much about how much progress we're making or how much fruit we bear or any of that stuff. Are we on the right road and going the right direction? We talked a lot about here recently about the road that is wide, and many are on it, and it leads to destruction in our Sunday series.
Yeah.
And narrow is the road, and few there are that are on that, but that's the road that leads to life. And the point of that is, which road are you on, and which way are you headed? If you're on the narrow road, which is the road that leads to life, that is the road that is the only road for a Christ follower, then you're good.
Yeah.
If it takes you a little, it's like heading out for, I don't know, if I'm going to walk to Coeur d'Alene on the Centennial Trail. It's like, it doesn't matter how long it
And
takes.
where are you starting at?
I'm going to start in Spokane here somewhere.
You're going to 30-mile walk? This is
Sure.
great. When are you doing this? I'll join.
Tomorrow.
I'm in.
Yeah. I'm going to probably leave around 11 p.m. You don't need to sleep, do you? We'll just walk all through the
No,
night.
I'd do it. If you're doing it, I would be in. I got headlamps.
all right.
I got gel packets. Let's
All right.
go.
All right. Well, you be there.
I got some
And
new
if I
shoe-
don't show, you just go ahead and go without me.
I got some new shoes coming tomorrow, so it'll be great.
But you get the idea. So if it takes me a half a day to walk that, or I walk it in a couple of hours, or if I run it, or if I'm on a bicycle and I do it, none of that really is as important as, am I on the right road, the Centennial Trail that will get me there, and am I making progress at all? Now, if I'm standing still, that's a different story. But if I'm just at some pace or another making progress, that's awesome.
Yeah, and all that is to say, have you found Jesus? The Jesus that loves you, forgives you, is full of grace and mercy.
And are you following
And
him?
are you following him? And that's what it means.
That's the Find and Follow podcast.
That is it. So, good word, Craig. Thanks for wrapping it up for us. Appreciate you tuning in, joining us for another episode. If you do have ideas for where we should head next in the scriptures that would be helpful for you, feel free to let us know, getting some ideas already. It's much appreciated. But we'll be back again shortly for hopefully some more like Gonzaga championship talk basketball and some Jesus. You can help people find and follow Jesus by subscribing to the podcast, sharing it with some friends, and leaving a review so it's easier for others to find it.